Hey Shaman fam, it's the fuck? Hey Shaman fam, it's Mandy from MBA Shaman. Today I'm going to be talking to you about your relationship with your drum. And specifically, not just how you use your drum in your daily journeys, but also the symbolic nature of the drum and what the drum can hold and what the drum can represent. You probably do what I did, which is you'll go to your local library or bookstore or Amazon and you will just start reading all about it. I have a stack of books here that I wanted to just talk to you guys a little bit about, because this is some of the reading that I've been doing lately, and especially brushing up for this channel. It's been really amazing. So for all you new shamans out there, I think you're probably familiar with Sandra Ingerman's Awakening the Spirit World. This is really just one of those great go-to books if you're a first-timer and just really want to understand the various machinations of shamanism. So what is the upper world? What is the lower world? What is the middle world? What's a power animal? Just those basic 101 questions. This is an excellent place to start. As you go a little bit further, what you may find is, while this was an excellent kind of map and starting point, I started to crave learning more about people's individual relationships with shamanism. And in fact, this is like a little bit of a pop culturally book, but this is actually the second book that I ever got, which is The Shaman in Stilettos. It's the story of a celebrity journalist, Anna Hunt, who is based in the UK and left and went to Peru on her shamanic journey. And I just thought, okay, it basically looks like chick lit. This seems fairly accessible. Like, I'm gonna read this. And as you get even deeper into the journey, there's different ways that your path can go. And for me, what I became really interested in was people's individual specific relationships with shamanism and their personal growth. And so in this book, the author, who is a PhD psychotherapist, talks about how she integrated shamanism into her practice and actually gives examples of various clients that she's worked with. And really it was a challenge, action, solution kind of framework, right? Like, here's the challenge that my client here had. Here was a healing methodology that I used, or here's a kind of pathway or guide that I used in shamanism, and then here's how it was resolved. This was a very satisfying read in that sense because of the practicality of it. Of course, as you go deeper and deeper, you might find yourself being drawn to certain Jungian influences, such as the shaman's body. And this one, there's a lot of cross-references between Jung's work with the dreaming body and the way that it's described here, which is essentially, the connection between shamanism and what he calls lucid dreaming, which, of course, as anyone with a psychology background knows, that's very modern psychology speak, right? So there's a lot about the dreaming body, accessing with intention your dreaming body in this book. And of course, all kinds of cultural flavors and directions that you can go. Personally, for me, this book has been very interesting. I'm Chinese. That's my background, and so I was really interested in the history of Chinese shamanism, and specifically in this one, it's manifested through Qigong. And this book is actually just a series of poses that it teaches you to do, a series of movements and poses, Qigong poses, and then behind that, it talks about the connection to the spirit world through these poses, which I think is just incredible. It doesn't hurt also that I can read some of these Chinese characters and really have that kind of second depth level of understanding. So I highly encourage, if you come from a certain lineage or have a certain interest in a culture, that there's gonna be a book on shamanism related to XYZ culture for whatever you're interested in. Just do the research, it's out there. And I even went so far as to read about shamans in Africa. And just trying to understand kind of the commonalities, the different types of mythologies, spiritual practices that were local to this region. obviously, anytime you read a cultural work, you have to take it with a grain of salt. You know, you have to be a discerning reader. You have to think about, are there biases, or are there racial, political, economical differences that the writer doesn't quite see because, you know, maybe there's like a gap in that, right? So what I'm saying is that none of these books are perfect, but in totality, I think that if you are going to take shamanism seriously, it is a great place to start to really mix and match all of your resources. And as I was reading these, what I would call really like modern and accessible shamanism books, they continually, time after time, every single one of these books, probably with the exception of this Qigong one, because the author was probably like, yeah, I'm just going to delve into my 10,000 years of Chinese history. I don't give a crap. But with the exception of some of them, most of these books cited, alluded to, referenced the seminal text on shamanism, of course, which is by Mircea Eliade, which is the book on shamanism published in 1951. And what I really appreciate about this book, and there are criticisms of this book as well, one of which is perhaps that the author was looking for too much universality and therefore was sort of blending cultures and tribes together and had an outcome in mind and then just found evidence around the world to support that. Again, you have to take it with a grain of salt. This was written in 1951. I'm sure there's all kinds of offensive cultural biases that is in this book as well. However, what I do appreciate about this approach is that essentially this book is written from an ethnographer. Is that this book is written from an anthropological point of view, and that it really is a collection of stories and a collection of information about the history, the symbolism, the etymology of certain beliefs and practices in shamanism. And one of those core things, we talk about this a lot in our shamanic training programs, is the initiation phase of becoming a shaman. And if you're new to the practice, you may find that you have just had a calling to it. We call it being called to the mantle of the healer, so holding that mantle. You may have just found yourself being increasingly curious about it. Perhaps you took a course and then the next thing you knew, you couldn't stop thinking about shamanism. I mean, obviously shamanism is really cool because it is about that direct experience. It's called direct revelation, right? And so there is no intermediary between you and your helping spirits. It really is your direct connection with them. So, as Eliade explains, a lot of the initiatory aspects of shamanism are very similar to Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero's journey, right? There's some sort of calling that happens, often involuntary. It's not that you wake up and say self-determined, I want to be a shaman. Perhaps you've been chosen to be one, or you feel an inexplicable draw to being one. There's also this idea that there's a series of really challenging and fateful feeling events. Usually a terrible sickness or a series of fevers, or you literally, one of the things is like you get struck by lightning. This is like a sign that perhaps you're meant to be a shaman. All under the same guise of, you've heard this story before, of the wounded healer, right? So we seek to heal that with which we healed ourselves. And through the healing of ourselves, we gain wisdom and can help others. What I love about that is that the story of the drum is very central to the initiatory phase in shamanism. Okay? Now, as a beginner shaman, you might look at the drum, and obviously we love a drum. I mean, who's not going to love this thing? I mean, there's just such stature. sound, there's something ceremonial about it. I mean, just even if you didn't know anything about the history of the drum in shamanism, you'd probably still love it, because what's not to love about this bad boy, right? I remember in some of my first shamanic trainings, I would go in and I didn't even have a drum. I didn't even have one. And I would go in and everyone had these amazing drums that looked like they'd been handed down generation after generation, and they were made of wood, and they had like elk skin and carvings, and I was just like, oh my god, like, am I just gonna order mine on Amazon Prime? Like, oh, I'm such a loser, you know? I definitely had drum envy, and that's a very normal thing because the drum is so cool, right? And what I wanted to share in this video is, yes, the drum is cool. We all can agree on that. But in this book, starting on page 168, I don't know if you can see, but there's actually a section on the purpose of the drum from a spiritual standpoint. And so going back to the initiation of the shaman, right? So the shaman has a calling, they have a dream, or they get struck by lightning, or they have a fever that doesn't break for 7 days and 7 nights. Like, it's something extreme that happens. But during this initiation phase, the shaman would go on a journey. And in this journey, they would typically see a couple of symbolic things. One of them would be they would go up a sacred mountain, a cosmic mountain, and at the top of this mountain they would find what's called a cosmic tree. And the cosmic tree is meant to symbolize really the center of the universe, the center of the world. And so if you think of a tree, and I will show you the back of the drum as an illustration, right? Think about the tree as you have the roots of the tree, and then you have the branches of the tree. The branches of the tree are the path with which the shaman uses to climb up and ascend to the heaven or the upper world or the celestial world or whatever you want to call it, right? And then the roots are which the shaman would actually use to tunnel or kind of go through or slide down, some sort of downward pulling motion in order to get to the lower world, the underworld, what have you. Okay? And to take it a step further, I want to read a really awesome couple of sentences, okay? So, when you think about that journey, you know, so leaving the ordinary world and entering the spirit world, right? Entering sacred space, entering sacred time. If you think about the beat of the drum, the drum is sometimes referred to as actually the horse, the shaman's horse. And this beat, this rhythm, is actually a means to transport you from the beginning of your travel. It's actually the vehicle with which you travel. Okay, so what's even cooler is that, remember this cosmic tree, the story is that a branch of the tree would fall, and it's from that branch that you would actually make the outside of your drum. And further, that the skin of the drum, the face of the drum, is made from an animal, typically. And that during a process of reanimating, which I interpret as the start of developing that relationship with your drum, being in conversation with the drum, having your drum come alive for you, you would learn the story of the drum. You would either learn the story of the drum such that the tree would kind of come alive, or that the animal spirit behind the skin of the drum would reanimate and tell you its story. It would actually tell you, this is where I came from, this is my parents' background, this is what I was doing before I gave my life to be the skin of your drum. And this process of animation happens, according to the book, through just alcohol. So you would take alcohol, you would take either beer, wine, I don't know, wine, I don't know, maybe like a clear liquid, like a vodka, and you would splash it on the drum, and during this motion is when the drum would reanimate and you would be in conversation with the drum. So let me just read you this little fancy ass part right here. So it says, by the fact that the shell of his drum is derived from the actual wood of the cosmic tree, The shaman, through his drumming, is magically projected into the vicinity of the tree, and he is projected to the center of the world and thus can ascend the sky. Now let's just let that sink in for a minute. So essentially, your drum is more than a drum. Your drum is a horse. Your drum is a storyteller. Your drum is made from the wood that is meant to symbolize the sacred tree with which you climb and you ascend. So when I read that, I think as a shaman, I get really excited because it just starts to make sense to me. It's not just a bunch of like mumbo jumbo, like, okay, close your eyes and hope something will happen, but actually there is a meaning, a history behind the shaman and his or her drum. And, okay, so both the shell and the skin of the drum constitute magico religious implements by virtue of which the shaman is able to undertake the ecstatic journey to the center of the world. On one hand, by drumming, the shaman flies away to the cosmic tree. Again, it's like no matter where you are, you're in ordinary reality. I'm in my bedroom. I'm sitting here. It's snowing outside. Like this is, it's 3 p.m. reality, okay? But by drumming, I'm able to call. I'm able to wake up. I'm able to go to that place by virtue of the fact that the drum itself is made of materials that are meant to invoke the cosmic center of the world, which, by the way, is a timeless place. Okay, so it's not like I'm going to the center of the world yesterday at 1 p.m. No, this is a place where time can stand still and where you can be in relationship with your dreaming body. Okay, one more sentence, which is, on the other hand, by virtue of his mystical relations with the reanimated skin of the drum, so the reanimated skin of the drum could be either your power animal spirit, it could represent your alter ego, it could represent the most powerful spirit that you know that will help you gain flight, go faster. I mean, think of, hear in your mind's eye for a second the sound of horses, right? That sound. And you're traveling and you're going. And is it not the exact same as it's the same. The shaman is able to share in the nature of the theriomorphic ancestor. In other words, he can abolish time and reestablish the primordial condition of which the myths tell. Very, very cool stuff. All right, so what's the takeaway from this? I mean, everyone's going to have their own thing that they interpret, but for me, what I'm interpreting is that the drum takes on a certain sacredness, that there is a certain relationship between myself and the drum. And I think that especially in this analytical world that we live in, this, how many time-saving apps do you have on your phone? How many grocery delivering services have you used in the past week? That there might be a relationship that is held sacred, that there might be something that transcends time and space and convenience and the daily machinations that we live in. And that for me, as a modern shaman, the idea that I might continue to develop a faith and a relationship with something so ordinary, really, as a drum, that an ordinary thing can take on meaning. For me, that is thrilling. That's revolutionary. The idea that I am not just a person going through the daily grind, that there are higher things that are happening, and that at any moment, I can be in connection with spirit and the divine. It's like totally incredible. I hope this was a little bit informative and inspiring, and leave me some comments below. I read all of them, and please, if this was helpful for you, like and subscribe to my channel. All right, thanks so much, guys.